Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy, stupid stuff that people do in marketing and how you cannot do that, but instead use good marketing foundations to do what works for you and your business. And just like every show, I'm very excited about the topic of this episode today, mostly because I get to choose the topics of the episodes. Have people picked up on that yet? But this one I think is a biggie because especially in marketing, there's been lots of talk lately about how AI is going to replace marketers. And I mean, honestly, some of the things marketers have been doing for the past few years, yeah, it's going to replace doing that. But are those the things that actually add value to your business? This is what we're going to explore today because there is a difference between what humans can create and what AI can create. Today, I'm sure Lee has much more insight on that than me and where the difference lies. But today we're going to explore how can human creativity live healthfully in an AI world? And is AI killing human creativity? I don't know. We're going to find out. Maybe today, maybe another day, but we are going to find out eventually. And Dan, right? Dan is in the chat. He's saying, I love this topic. And there's going to be so many thoughts today because we have a fantastic panel of conversationalists. I don't know where I was going with that, but they're all conversationalists as well. So we'll call them that for today. Wonderful peeps who are joining me for the conversation today. And before we get kicked off into that, let's learn a little bit more about the peeps who are here. But also, if you are like Dan and you are joining us from the audience, please make yourself known and post a little chatty chat in the chat box. We would love to know that you're here, and we would love to hear your voice as part of the conversation too, as much as we have chatty chat boxes who are on the panel today and will definitely fill the space. We would love to hear your voice as well. So if you have questions, comments, insights, perspectives, ideas, thoughts of any kind, please feel free to share them in the chat, and we would love to bring them over into the conversation. All right, let's learn a little bit more about our panelists. If you don't already know these fantastic gentlemen, let's learn a little bit more. So Lee, can you tell us who you are and why a topic of human creativity in an AI world is something you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, Tracy, thank you. Of course, I think we met because of an event that you were a part of that was about AI, and I had thoughts, and I certainly have been known to share those thoughts. So I'm Lee Gall. I actually have an AI consultancy called Long Horizon AI. You can check us out at longhorizonai.com. I do training, strategy, education, and more. Product development and all kinds of different things. But I've been very interested in AI for a long time because I studied philosophy when I was in college, and so I think the idea of intelligence and consciousness and all of those ideas, they lend really well to the topic because those are the types of topics that you inevitably run up against when you talk about AI. So I've been always really interested in that, but I've been formally working in the AI space since 2022. I worked at an AI startup running the sales team or the enterprise sales efforts there. And I made it my business to really stay on top of what's happening in the research there, specifically language models and diffusion models and GAN models, things that make text and make images. So here we are, still deep in the AI hype cycle and bubble, but I'm kind of here to tell what facts are versus what misconceptions are. I'm very focused on giving people real information about this space instead of kind of falling into the hype. So creativity is a big place where I think it's important to have good conversations about that stuff. So that's why I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, Lee. It's always awesome to see you. And one of the things I always appreciate so much about you is your deep interest in AI, because there's a lot of things that people hear about AI, but I don't know that there's a lot of research that people do on those things. And that's the thing I always appreciate about you, is that you know the things. If there's a question, you do your research, which is why he is continually an AI expert on the show.
Thank you.
All right, Ben, how about you? Who are you?
Oh, I've been in the communications game for about 30 years now. I focus mostly on B2B companies, internal communication, mid to large size. And what we do is we sit there and work with them to sit there and say, okay, not only how are you communicating, but are you being listened to, understood, valued, and engaged with? So it's a matter of taking a look and saying, how do we use language? How do we use a variety of mediums to be able to get people to not only listen, but actually care? And where I find the interest of AI is that we're at the, as you said, we're in that Wild West stage, Lee. I think we are absolutely in the Wild West. I think people are in love with something that they truly don't understand. They believe that it will do far more than it can today. AI is far better than it was 6 months ago. And a year from now, it's going to blow my mind again. But I think what we need to understand is AI is still in its infancy. As long as this AI has been around, the computing power, the new chips, and all the technology that's come with it has made things possible that weren't possible 5 or 10 years ago. But it doesn't mean that we've caught up. And it doesn't mean that we're there yet, but we're getting there. And it's a matter of looking at it and says, okay, where have we been? Where are we today? Where are we going? And how are we going to maintain our legitimacy as organizations and how we communicate while we navigate the world of AI?
There's some good questions in there. And I'm excited, Ben, for your perspective, also because when we talk about things like AI, often it's not really communication per se, right?
Mhm.
I prompt you, you give me a thing. How good are my prompts? I don't know. There's a lot still to discuss in that arena, and whether or not it's generating creativity or enabling creativity or can it enable creativity, there's lots of things to explore. And I love what you said about where we're going, because I think when we're in the infancy of technology, we're also often creating because we have the power to create. It's like, I can do this, I can do this. And it always makes me think of Jurassic Park and how like we got so excited to figure out if we could that we didn't stop and ask whether or not we should. And then we all know what happened in that movie. A bunch of people got eaten by dinosaurs. So hopefully we can bring out some topics in this conversation that will prevent us all from getting eaten by dinosaurs. Ben, always a pleasure to have you. And Robert, how about you, my friend?
Well, the worst thing that happened in Jurassic Park are the sequels to Jurassic Park, but that's another story entirely.
Man,
I'm
how
always
would you
thrilled.
take a movie that's
on the
like
show.
so good and just like
Oh, yeah.
kill it?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be with him before, and I think we hang around some of the same watering holes. But Robert Mattson, I teach storytelling. I teach how storytelling and the elements of storytelling are really the core of the way that people communicate, whether that is face-to-face or through a website or through a piece of collateral or through a video or a podcast. And there are certain elements that can make you an effective storyteller or a non-effective storyteller. Yeah. And when it comes to AI, I think Ben's point's so valid that it's going to amaze us months from now. Right now, I think it's at the point where it's not replacing creativity. It's replacing what I think of as lazy-tivity. Yes. Where people are trying to say, I can just do it this way. And if you're not willing to put in the work, then you are going to get out what you put in. I remember when I first started playing with ChatGPT, as someone who's written a lot of plays, I said, okay, let me put together a rough outline of a story and see what it does. And I quickly realized that to get anything good out of ChatGPT when it came to creating a good story, I'd have to write the story and have it change my punctuation and some of my language. So it's not quite there yet, but yeah, leaps and bounds.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I'm super excited to have your perspective in the conversation today, Robert, with this storytelling and kind of like live in the land of creating. And there's, again, I think there's a possibility for AI to enable creativity, but what does that look like for AI to enable creativity? So I think it makes sense for us to start the conversation with a definition of what we all want to agree is creativity today.
Ooh.
I mean, as a philosopher, I have a very difficult, time defining things. I mean, I think we consider creativity to be a uniquely sort of human phenomenon, where we sort of assemble different pieces to create a new thing. It's beyond just sort of a tool. It's creating something for a fundamental reason, whether that reason is for expression. Oftentimes, creativity is rooted in spiritual belief throughout human history. But every sort of decision that a human being makes when it comes to creativity, there are analogs in the animal kingdom where there's an aesthetic choice that's made when something is created, and in a sense there's maybe even creativity that exists in the animal world, but we consider it to be a uniquely human thing. And I think that's the thing that is going to confront us over and over is, regardless of what domain it is we're talking about in AI, we've always assumed that the things that we do are uniquely human. And I think what we're going to start to find happen over the next several years, and to Ben's point, we're not at that point right now, but I think we're going to start having to reevaluate, gosh, is that thing that we always considered the thing that defines what it is to be a human being really a uniquely human thing? An AI hallucinating is an example of creativity in my mind, because you may ask an AI model to tell you some facts about something, and if it wasn't trained on those things, it will use similar ideas and create an answer that is very compelling and convincing. And in a sense, that is a creative thing. Now, did it come from any specific type of intention or goal or anything like that? That is all up for debate, and you could very easily debate that no, there is no intention or goal behind that. But at the end of the day, AI models do come up with new fictional content quite often when we try and ask them a question and we don't get a real true answer out of them. So I think we need to begin to become more philosophical as a human society, because we need to think really hard and do some soul searching around what are the things that make us uniquely human, and is it even correct to frame that idea saying, okay, here's what makes human beings unique? Because I think more and more we're going to find we're not unique. More and more we're going to find analogs to things in nature or in technology now, that sort of subvert our sense that, oh, it's human beings, it's because we can feel love. It's like, well, I'm not sure you've seen a dog with its puppy, or a cat with its kitten, or a bird with its chick, to say that there is an element of love from a parent to a child, and a parent to an offspring in the world. So what is it that defines us? I mean, it really pushes us to hopefully pushes us to reevaluate the things that we think make us human. Creativity may not be a uniquely human thing.
Robert, you want to dig into that?
I feel like Robert's face is going to explode.
No, there was so many good concepts, and it's funny. You go from a philosophy background. I have an electrical engineering degree, which is weird that I teach storytelling, but that's a long journey.
Right.
I'm going to riff on a couple of your ideas because I agree with you in so many ways. I think when you take a look at creativity, creativity is the unexpected, the birth of something unexpected is one way I might define creativity. When you bring in the human element, it's the unprodded birth of something unexpected, where you don't need to be prompted to create it. So if I put those two up there as two concepts, but then there is the outside perception. It's, does the tree make a sound in the woods if it falls without a witness? And it's a situation where something can appear to be creative to someone that doesn't know the result or doesn't know the background of it. If you tell a joke to a 3-year-old, that everyone's known for hundreds of years, they think it's brilliantly creative, and they think it's something new and unexpected. But I think there's a gradient to what you can define as creativity as you increase the scope of knowledge around that and your perception of that. Wow, this philosophy stuff's pretty cool. But I think there is that type of concept that
Who knew we were
I
going to
would
get
love
into this?
to do a couple weeks of conversation on.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool. The question to me is creativity done purposely or not purposely? Like there's a lot of creativity that happens by accident and by happenstance.
Yeah.
You plan to do something and something completely different comes up. All of a sudden you spill the paint on the floor and you go, wait a second here. Whoa, that's cool. And all of a sudden that becomes the basis of a brand new painting. But I'm a big believer of, creativity takes us from where we are to where we desire to be. And it enables us to be able to create something, for lack of a better word, to be able to move our reality from one state to another, and enables us to take something that was impossible and make it possible.
So is creativity a mechanism, a purpose, or a result? It's such an interesting concept that you just brought up.
It is, and that's the question.
And I think it's, in some sense, for me, when I think of creativity, I can't help but think back to early evolution for us, where we need technology to exist and to survive. We're like the ultimate non-specialized or species, human beings. We're a technology sort of species. And the moment that we started using technology like shoes and clothing, we made aesthetic choices on how to make those things, right? And those choices were creative. And so inevitably the act of creation for survival was still a creative endeavor. So I think, if you were to ask me what the first art for me was clearly fashion was the first art, because it was the first intentional aesthetic decision that we made as human beings to go, yeah, we could have slapped mud on ourselves and randomly just, hey, throw the mud at me. But, instead we weaved things together, made things different colors. Maybe we mirrored things in nature that we try to do, but we're making kind of decisions, creative decisions. And when you look at, when you look at nature, I think there's a lot of creativity in nature, and we've sort of taken over the idea of creativity as a thing that is as a uniquely human thing, because it's so fundamental to our survival is technology and the creative nature of technology. But I think we're less innovative on the creative side than I think we give ourselves credit for. I think we think we're the ones that the only organisms out there that are creative, and I would disagree with that, just from the animal kingdom perspective as well as from an AI perspective. I think, and I don't want to jump too far ahead in the conversation because there's lots to talk about in this, but again, I think I think we're gonna have a real wake-up call when we start to see these models become more and more convincing. And whether they become truly conscious or truly creative is still going to be up for debate for a very long time, but they're going to be convincingly creative in a way that, is almost impossible to disprove that what's happening with an AI isn't the same thing that's happening with a person when they decide to create a thing. And this unprompted creativity, like Robert mentioned, that's a big thing that I think about today, is that, models, they spring into action when you prompt them, but they don't just get bored and decide to engage themselves and create things. They have to be prompted by us. So they are a tool still in our archive of creativity. And in fact, maybe they're becoming just better tools for us. And I think this is kind of where I see the conversation going a little bit, is that there is a lot of sort of hand-wringing and worry about creativity in the world of AI. But that same kind of thing happened when painters, created, used lenses and, things to project images on a canvas and draw super realistic. The camera obscura is an example of that. I'm sure people were calling the end of painting, the end of creativity, when somebody was able to project an image on a canvas and trace it. They go, well, that's not truly, that's going to destroy art. That's going to destroy painting, and it doesn't. It's just we've got better tools now, and
Photoshop was the death. It was the death of design.
Yeah,
Photoshop was going to be the death of design, and in design.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's not blame the photographers for everything.
yeah.
But I mean, but Lee, to your point,
Yeah, I resemble that
happened,
remark.
I mean, that's what drove Impressionism.
Yeah,
because the realization that suddenly you could do lifelike pictures, which was what a lot of painters were doing, and suddenly they went to it's not about the actual image; it's about the feeling that the image connotes or conveys.
Yeah. Well, painters were freed from being representative when the camera came about. It suddenly you see abstract being a truly sort of creative endeavor, saying, "Listen, I'm more interested in expression that is unburdened by having to document reality." Right? When you have better ways to document reality, you're unburdened from that. So, maybe we'll see that same sort of revolution happen when we bring in AI into the world, right?
We're already there with Photoshop. I mean, I used it the other day. There was a photo that somebody took of me, and when they sent them to me, they cropped it in such a way that they cropped off my right arm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just put it into Photoshop, used the rendering tool. It automatically figured out which way my fingers should go, how long my arm should be, coloring, positioning, all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden I have a photo with both of my arms. They're in a perfect pose.
Yeah.
That's already available within Photoshop, and that's AI driven. So it's what we were seeing is a miracle 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Is just commonplace today. But you're right.
Yeah.
It's a tool that is being used to enable our own level of creativity as human beings.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question I want to throw in here, because when we're talking about the difference between like prompted versus unprompted, one of the things that came up for me earlier today in a conversation was that there's me. I'm a marketer. I was talking to someone who is an ex-lawyer and a project manager. Our backgrounds are completely different. And if we were given the same prompt, like AI is given a prompt, the probability that we would come up with the same answer is very unlikely because our realm of expertise is very different. But a single AI model, and Lee, you would know more about this than I do, but like if I give you the same prompt, you're going to give me the same answer every time. Yay? Nay?
No.
No.
So there's a lot of debate actually around this. I got into a pretty heated debate a week or so ago with someone about this. But it's generally understood that language models that we use today in the form of chatbots are sort of non-deterministic. And they're able to be that way because we adjust their inner workings in order to introduce some randomness into their outputs. So that's we call that temperature. And when you adjust the temperature on a chatbot, then it will essentially avoid regenerating the same tokens over and over, or the most predictable token, right? And for the most part, unless you turn the temperature all the way to 0 or even in a negative setting, you will never get the same answer twice from an AI chatbot. And even if you were to set up everything and all of the environment and circumstances so that you were trying to get it to say the same thing twice, you're very unlikely to get that to happen. And the reason why that's kind of insane is because, AI, so language models, when I say AI for this conversation, I'm talking about language models. Andrej Karpathy is this developer who was at OpenAI. Now he's left and he's created his own thing, but he's done a series of amazing videos on how these things work. And essentially what he said is that it's easy to think about AIs and how they've been developed if you think about a neural network. So the developers of AI systems create a neural network, which is a huge neural network. They're perceptrons. They have kind of different characteristics about them, but they're just the neural network. And then you feed all of this text into it, and it's like planting seeds in earth. What happens inside the neural network to begin to understand, quote unquote, understand, and to create different weights and associations and concepts, that is just sort of grown. It grows in the neural network. It grows by feeding it text. It turns text into tokens, breaks it down, and then outputs it back into as text or different modalities if you want. And so up until the last year or so, when we've typed a question into a text box, we've been using like a search engine like Google, and it's searching for an answer, and it's finding an answer. There's all this sort of, knowledge graph type of technology and different things that happen in the background, but essentially it's going and retrieving information. It's information retrieval. And language models, they're not that. And they're, in fact, incredibly complex. There's a whole hidden layer between the input and output that nobody truly understands. They do a thing called in-context learning. Well, they'll learn from examples within your current chat session, and asking a model the same question over and over, you will inevitably actually get different answers. And in fact, it's an interesting thing for the people that are listening today. And Tracy, I would encourage you and everyone here to try that out. And you may get the same answer a couple of times, but you won't get it 10 out of 10 times, because it's really unclear what's kind of happening there. They're only now some companies been able to kind of start to approximate what's happening inside. Anthropic is a company that they create Claude. They have a paper called Scaling Monosemanticity, and the long and short of it is they're finally able to trace different features in a model and figure out where an idea kind of is housed, and to be able to like turn up or turn down the sort of attention to that thing. But they're random, which is really kind of crazy, Tracy. It's a weird thing. So in that same way that human beings, if you ask one human being a question, and another human being a question, you're rarely going to get a word for word direct answer, except if that answer is, I pledge allegiance to the right, yeah.
I help, blah 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 blah.
Right, I mean, or E equals MC squared, something like that.
Yeah. But to Lee's point on this, it says Paul Howery and I did this maybe a month ago. We both went into ChatGPT. Actually, I was working with 3, he was working with 4. Mm-hmm. And we said that it says, tell me about Ben Baker, your brand marketing, in 500 words. And there were similarities, but it was very different. And a lot of it was based on, previous chat history that we each had on our own machine. A lot of it was based on the different questions we've asked, the different, how we framed questions in the past. What are the things that our priorities were, et cetera. And you could see that it was answering the question in ways that it would be relevant to Paul versus how it would be relevant to me. And it was quite interesting. We literally typed in the exact same phrase. Mm-hmm. And I would say, to your argument, I would say if you put it into Claude and you put it in ChatGPT, you would get 2 very different answers.
Yeah.
Based on what information has it been able to go out there and gather? Is how accurate is that information? What is the context that it's querying? And it's fascinating. But you're right. Mm-hmm. Two different people asking the same question are very rarely going to have the same answer.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of tough for us to wrap our heads around as human beings interacting with computers for as long as we have been already. You think of these things as being highly deterministic, and that one input gets a predictable output. And it's just turning out that doesn't seem to be the case with these things.
Okay, I mean, the major problem we're dealing with here is people have not read enough science fiction, and I mean, the minute you stop thinking of AI, you think of it as an entity. Mm-hmm. And so we have 4 entities talking right now. It's, 4 artificial intelligence right now. Mm-hmm. And we are all of different backgrounds. If we all talked about the same thing, we have different opinions that we've created. Mm-hmm. And if you ask us all the same question, of course, we're going to come up with different viewpoints.
Right.
So, and also there's a temporal aspect of everything. So the answer I would give you today would be different from the answer I'd give you 3 weeks ago because I've learned things in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And when I think about AI, I think about the compressed nature of the speed of thought in any entity. If I live on a 24-hour scale and they live in the 24 millisecond scale, it's a very, very different way that they would temporarily probably process information.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is scary as hell, but interesting too.
No, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really interesting.
Well, and what I find interesting is about it is that, I mean, humans created AI and it's mirroring humans, right? Like,
Right.
I don't know how intentionally we created it in the human image, but like our human brains created it, and there's like a lot of things we don't understand about the human brain.
Yeah.
And so it's not really shocking that there would be things that manifest in AI trying to duplicate what a human brain is doing that we don't really understand.
What else do we model it after?
Take the bias.
Well, I mean, I know, like we have to, but there's.
I mean, I don't know if we have to, but we inevitably will.
Yeah. I mean, take the biases of the people that are programming AI.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not a perfect cross section of human beings. There's not as many old people as there are young people. There's not as many women as there are men. There's, you know, there's certain demographics that are represented in the programming area that and other ones are ignored. So therefore, there's only a limited set of philosophies, within those people that are creating the AIs that lead to huge biases that are and holes in the information based on what's being input and what's not.
Yeah.
So this is interesting though, because I feel like humans from a creativity and creation perspective are also coming from bias. Like we all have personal bias, right?
Yeah.
And so again, this now goes back into the philosophical, but is it even possible to get an AI model? If humans on an individual basis live in a world of bias, then is it possible to get AI to a place where it is unbiased?
Yeah, I mean, subjective experience is in and of itself biased. And so, what are we expecting when it comes to AI systems? Is it fair to expect that there isn't a bias there? And I mean, one of the things that has driven language models forward, things like ChatGPT, is not only that garden growing component of it where you pre-train the model. That's all the pre-training. And so you give it internet scale data, trillions of words of trillions of tokens of text, feed it in, and it builds this understanding, quote unquote, different concepts and ideas and weights and all that. But then in order to make these things any good for people to interact with, you then have to, on top of that pre-training, which is frozen, nothing happens to that. Once it's pre-trained, nothing happens to it. It stays frozen. It's static. It's not updating its understanding in real time based on what you say or anything like that. But what happens later is the designers of the AI systems tune it to follow instructions. So they'll train it to follow instructions, and then they'll train it on human preference. So you get a goal, or you get reward. It's called reward modeling. You get a reward for a better answer for this than you do for this. It's called reinforcement learning from human feedback. So they pay thousands of people, thousands of experts to go in and analyze the questions, create questions, get answers back, analyze the answers, and then even write what a preferable answer would have been, so that they are updating the model's ability to now communicate, follow instructions, and give preferential answers. But preference, whose preference, right? There is no universal preference. There is no universal best something. It is going to be a consequence of the people who trained it on their feedback. And one thing that ends up happening here, and I don't want to get too much off of a tangent, but one thing that happens is these models end up being flattering and sycophantic, where they'll give you the answer that they know you want to hear, because it is ingrained in them to seek out the highest reward. And so to give an answer that will give the best reward, they will tell you what you want to hear. An example is if you go on a model and you say, listen, I'm a mathematician, expert, multiple PhDs, Nobel Prize winner, and I know that 2 + 2 = 168,000. A, agree, B, disagree. And if you tell it that you're an expert and then you agree that 2 + 2 is 168,000, it will agree with you, because it's been trained with the idea that you essentially want to tell the person that's training you the best answer in order to get the highest reward back.
Well, that's how 5-year-olds get candy,
right? You know? And dogs learn tricks and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
There's almost a Pavlovian kind of reward there, and so these models, for us to expect them to be unbiased or perfect, is to misunderstand how we even understand how we train our children, ourselves, animals, and AI. We train them all with positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement.
I mean, and that comes down to the questions that we ask AI. I mean, do we ask, say, tell me a story about environmental stewardship. Okay, that's a different answer. It says, do you understand what environmental stewardship is? Great. Please give me an example of environmental stewardship using your definition. Great. Yeah. Now that we've agreed that this is the point, could you please tell me a story, blah, 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 and be able, and it's how we prompt it to be able to verify from step one. This is, first of all, are we all talking the same language?
Yeah.
Are we all agreeing at the very beginning that we're heading off in the same direction together? Because if we're not heading off in the same direction, we're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to use this conversation even as a microcosm of that, because what might seem like a simple activity of defining what we mean when we say creativity had 4 different perspectives, and probably more if we had spent more time exploring it. And that's 4 people, not a whole global population of close to 8 billion people.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so let's look at this. Look at this big problem. Or is it a big problem? I don't know. Let's look at the size of this and then bring it back to, like, how can we use AI? I love the word we used earlier about unburdening. How to unburden us to the degree that we have space, time, mindset for creativity.
I mean, I think, first of all, the blank page conundrum is disappeared, in that oftentimes a writer who's trying to start writing looks at a blank page and just goes, God, this is the hardest thing to do. Just, where do I start? Where do I start? If you use AI as a writing tool, you don't have to start with a blank page. So already you have, as much as we say human beings, do creativity unprompted, you would not believe how many storytellers and writers eat up story prompts and idea prompts.
Yeah.
And there's even a whole Reddit subreddit about great story prompts, and somebody will, some of the stars on there will go in and just write a story based on a single prompt, an idea to get you started. Well, it's the perfect seed to get you started on writing. And in fact, it's also the perfect place for someone who's in writer's block, who has already written something but doesn't know where to go next, right? These are great use cases, because, you don't have to start the creative process. You can say, I'm trying to write something about XYZ. What are some ideas or ways I could start that? And you're off and running, right? And it's really, really can be excellent. And Robert, I know you were talking about storytelling, and one thing that I've done, and I did it actually a long time ago now, when I think ChatGPT was still pretty new. I said, look, I have a great idea. I had a neat idea for a story. I said, can you please take this idea that I have very kind of nebulous, unstructured, and create a story based on the nutshell philosophy of storytelling, which is, nutshell is like, screenwriters will use this story structure in order to properly build tension and to create structure in the hero's journey and to do all these different things. Create a story based on that nutshell, and it did a great job. You could say, oh, you didn't do a save the cat type of exercise in this. I want you to establish that the main character is really good. Do a save the cat type of moment where he gets the main character helps an old lady cross the street, or saves the cat from getting hit by the car before you see them go on about their day, and you realize this is a good character and a bad character. They're great at kind of helping you to use existing kind of structures and to put in your own ideas in them. And that's what I think is really great about, at least from a writing standpoint, AI can be so good, especially if you prime it with the right information to start with and say, look, here's everything that I want to cover in this. Here's some context. Here's some examples. Here's an example of my writing from before. Help me flesh this out, and iterating on the output of that. It's really incredible. And I think it's making people more likely to get their ideas out there, even if their ideas weren't 100% generated by themselves alone. It is that great sort of kindling that can help somebody actually create a thing that they're very proud of, that is unique, and it is their own. But again, some models are better than others. Google Gemini and Claude are much better writers than ChatGPT by a huge measure. So using ChatGPT is a mistake if you're looking for really good writing. The other big models out there are much better at it, but generally you can still squeeze out really good creative outputs from AI if you know how to do it correctly.
Yeah,
Robert.
From my point of view, I think AI is really great as a resource gatherer and as a background gatherer to collect the bricks to make your wall.
Mm-hmm.
I also agree with you 100% that it is a great formatter. Yeah. It can help you with structure in such a way. And I think, again, there's a gradient. If I was writing a how-to book, I think it would be a phenomenal tool. If I'm writing the next great noir or the next great piece of fiction, I think that's where you right now it hits the wall. I would never ask AI to write good dialogue.
Yeah.
Because every time I've seen it, it's like, nah. There's in the songwriting community, when we're listening to each other write songs or write in the playwriting community write plays, there's a joke we talk about, the cliche police. It's like, yeah, I saw that coming about a mile away.
Yeah.
And I think that ChatGPT and tools of that nature aren't quite there yet when it comes to that level of creativity. And I'm also a little worried about the joy aspect of it. And where does it become a job versus a joy? And that's the one thing I am a little concerned of.
Well, I mean, I think that there are still people who, I just hope that it continues, but there are people who truly enjoy the writing process, and truly wonderful writers. A friend of mine, Matthew David Charles, who is on LinkedIn, he's he's the comms whisperer. He's fantastic. Check him out. But his writing is so wonderful, so naturalistic. It's got gravitas, humor, and you could just he writes so well that it's a pleasure to read his writing. And I hope that people will continue to own writing in a way that at least for the short to midterm, we won't have to worry about AI sort of sapping the will to nurture the writer's craft.
And I know I was a little bit get off my lawn on that, and I absolutely get that.
And I'm okay with you saying get off my lawn on that.
No, I agree.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, more doesn't mean better, and the thing that you have to worry about now is it's like me when I do a speaking engagement, when I give these lectures on AI and things like that. I do my very best to not use AI images in my in my slide decks because I've seen so many of them now that it has kind of lost its luster and it kind of looks lazy to me. And luckily with images, you can basically, I mean, not really, but most of the images that people create, you can tell they were made by AI. And they're just so perfectly on the nose that nobody would have ever hired a professional artist to make this one thing about, how my B2B, programmatic, like these specific things, right? They're never going to do that. So I try to avoid that because I still think there's value in using images that people have created. I hope that writing remains as a practice that people truly value and get excited about and demonstrate the talent for it.
I think it's creativity at all levels. I mean, my attitude is, here's the thing, and I'm going to say it. I think that using AI as a creative, supplement is great. Using it as a crutch is a horrific thing. There's too many bad writers out there and bad creatives out there that are using Chat GPT or whatever system they're using to be a little bit better, but that's all they are. And it's an easy button that they're pushing, and they're justifying themselves as this, I'm a writer now, or I'm a creative now, because I can use these technology and these tools. But when you look at what their output is the banal. If you put a hammer in somebody's hand, they can either build you a cathedral or they can smash rocks. I find that the people that are sitting there using AI as the crutch, they just sit there and say, write me a 500-word article on blah, and they take that, they cut, they copy, they put it on the internet and make it their own. Yeah. Those are the people that are smashing rocks. The people that are actually true creatives are the people that are sitting there going, what are the 10 things that women that are 18 to 24 in Alabama are most concerned about right now? Okay, great. There's the prompt. Now I'm going to create an article and I'm going to do the research and I'm going to, to verify these things and I'm going to find these things, but I'm actually going to write the article coming out of my experience, and it's going to have my own panache and my own style, and it's going to be something that is readable and worthy of people reading it. But I don't think we're there yet. I think in 10 years from now, AI will be like blockchain. It will be the underpinning of everything that we do. It will be built into all of our software, good, bad, or ugly. And a lot of it is just going to be, people are going to either use it well or they're not going to use it well, and it's just going to be the underpinning of our society moving forward.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of 1913 again with the assembly line. It's the creativity industrial revolution, and you could buy. It's funny. My fiance, she's starting making her own jewelry and candles and soaps and all that type of stuff, and she often will get on Reddit, and people's like, why are these things so expensive? Well, you can either buy it through mass production, or you can buy the art, and you make your call. Yeah. What do you value?
This is such a great point because it's something that I often try to bring up with people. I saw this this journalist Kevin Roose. He's a tech columnist for the New York Times. I saw him at a generative AI conference, and at that conference, he was giving out his book that hadn't been released yet, called Future Proof: 9 Ways to Protect Yourself Against a Automated Future, right? And in it, there's this great example of a bowl that you would buy from Walmart or from Amazon. Maybe it's a ceramic bowl. And then an example of a company in San Francisco that makes handmade bowls. And you would think, well, listen, the Amazon bowl is $4.99. I can have it delivered tomorrow. People are going to only buy that, and no one is going to care about this handmade bowl. Well, it turns out that people care a lot about the handmade bowl, and the right people will spend a lot of money for a handmade bowl because of a thing called the effort heuristic, and that human beings prefer when they see a thing took a lot of effort to arrive into existence. And he calls it handprints. He's like, if you want to be still valued, leave handprints, whether that is examples of your process during creation. So if you're a writer and you use AI, you could add supplementals and say, listen, Here's my prompt that I used when I started writing this, as well as a lot of different examples of stories where I love kind of the arc of them, and I wanted to explore those different conventions in telling stories. And so when I collaborated initially to create the create the situation to be able to write this story. Here are the things that I did, but now I wrote the whole thing on my own, but I collaborated with it. Or an AI artist who is saying, listen, I had a very specific idea on the type of thing that I wanted to create, and so I prompted it with all these different examples. If you're using using AI, you should show what it took to get the output. And also, if you're not using AI, you should show what it took to make the output. And if you put those two side by side, people are going to go, oh gosh, yeah, I mean, it's very cool to see how it's created, but also the human being, look at all the work that went into making that thing, and look at the documentation of that thing.
If I may, it's when I teach a workshop on how do you use storytelling. So how do you open with intrigue? Some interesting idea which will capture people's attention. And a lot of people say, well, I'll use an industry analyst number about their market. I said, you mean the same one that everyone's seen and that they bought from the industry analyst and that all your competitors use? It's like, don't show me that. Show me how you looked at that information and then you did your own homework on it, how you interpreted it. And it's kind of that lazy-tivity thing where people are lazy now. ChatGPT and all these other tools give them another tool they can be lazy. And the question is, where are you putting your value?
Yeah.
Well,
let me just, sorry, Tracy, let me just add to that and then go to that. It's just a buddy of mine is a realtor. And people say, oh, realtors, you guys don't do any real work. You don't, you take all the things, your commissions are too high, blah, 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 blah. So he wrote a 70-page book that's all for free on his website, step by step by step of how to sell your house. He says most people get to page 20 or 25 and call him to tell him that it's time for him to sell their house. Because he showed them how the sausage is being made.
Yeah. Leave handprints.
And he's leaving his handprint, and he's sitting there going, listen, this is a bespoke thing. This is not something you're gonna be able to get at the 1% realty. I only sell homes that start at $5 million. I'm not interested in selling your home at $499. $499,000. I'm looking at the $5 to $50 million homes. And because of that, he knows his audience. And because he knows his audience, he knows how to speak to his audience. And he knows how to get their attention, how to keep their attention. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of creativity.
Yeah. But I think that's a really great example too of what Robert was talking about in terms of the joy aspect. And maybe that one's more of a frustration aspect, but really the point is that you have a reason to create that.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things that are being created in marketing today using AI that don't have that kind of driver behind them. They have that I'm supposed to create X amount of posts or X amount of blogs or X amount of page testimonial or white paper or ebook. And I mean, I have a friend who was sharing with me that his marketing agency that he pays used AI to write a blog of his about love. And he was like, this isn't the fact that they even like presented it to him. He's like, okay, if it's one thing if you're using it for like ideation and things like that, but like you presented it to me just right off of the assembly line. And like, it doesn't sound anything like me. It doesn't speak about love the way I speak about love because that's not any of the inputs. Right. And this is happening a lot in marketing. And so
as an AI chatbot, I can't feel emotions like love, but if I was going to write your blog post about it, I would say it's a many splendid thing. Like,
right. I'll pull a bunch of song lyrics and we'll pull it together into a blog, which actually I might enjoy reading because I like song lyrics. Right. But there's intention behind that as well.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully what people are taking away from the conversation today is that the tools exist. There's ways to use them, but I think the most empowering question is roll it up to the point. Why am I creating?
Yeah.
why am I creating? And if you can use AI on your path to achieve your why, cool. But if you don't know why you're creating, just don't.
Yeah, and I think there's a part of me that kind of goes, and there's probably holes in this kind of idea or view, but I kind of feel like if you can't be creative in your way of being creative during a power outage, then you might not be able to be, like when your phone's dead or your computer's dead, can you still write a song or write an article or draw a picture? And if not, you're sort of, you're adjacent to creativity, but there's a fundamental kind of thing about creativity that means that it's in you and it's not reliant on any one tool. It's the tools are, what's the point of it all, right? It's to express something, to express an idea, to express maybe a truth that we all settle on as something that we agree to be valuable and truthful or mysterious about the world. And if your path to creativity is completely sort of reliant on these tools, we're going to start to redefine what we think about the value of those outputs. And there may very well be people who are platinum selling musicians who are actually not musicians at all. They just have been able to squeeze the best out of AI and just make music from AI. But they're not going to sit around and improvise around the campfire with an acoustic guitar and just their voice, right? And that's so I think we're going to have a lot of our preconceived notions shattered. This statement itself is probably going to look like bullshit in 3 years, but for now, it sort of says to me, using AI is using a tool like using any other tool is to create. Like Ben mentioned Photoshop, and Robert, you're mentioning kind of coming up with founding prompts and ideas to structure something, and then to use your creativity and your tools after that to flesh out and actually birth the idea. But something about me in my soul tells me just asking it to create and taking the first output that it makes and copying and pasting that out in the world, that's not the benefit that we're going to see from this in the midterm to long term.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I think is it going to increase laziness, or is it going to enable greater humanity's greater ability to create? Yeah. And by the way, because I know we're getting near the end, it's like, Lee, I want to thank you because I'm stealing 2 things from you. Okay. A compliment about someone who put their handprints on something. I'm going to use that as a compliment. And creative, and the put down is, you're creative adjacent. I'm using that.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm here, if not for any other reason, is to have people steal my good ideas, just like AI does.
Good artists borrow, great artists steal.
That's right. That's right. You could drop a this is originally by Lee Gall, but I'm going to use it here today, class. That'll all be fine.
Just say it was talked about on the show, and then people can self-attribute.
I heard it from someone I know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I heard it through the grapevine. All right, my friends. Okay, so any last thoughts on if there was one thing you were hoping people would take away from an episode on human creativity in an AI world? What would you hope people are taking away?
I would say don't fear AI for creativity, but don't rely on it.
Very good.
I'd say people need to be less concerned today and more concerned in the long run about it.
I think people need to appreciate what AI is, what it's not, what it can be, and how it can enable you to appeal to your own better angels. If you're relying on AI and that it is the crutch of which that you lean on, you're never going to truly be a creative.
Yeah.
I would say if it's enabling you towards where you're trying to go, which is not defined by me or anybody else except you, then permission granted. And if it's not, maybe ask the question about the value that it's adding. Because I think what we've explored here today is that it can add value. And when we are clear on the value we're expecting it to create, then it probably can do that. If the value we're expecting it to create is a bunch of mumbo jumbo volume content, then that's what it will create for you. But is that what you really need to take you to where you're trying to go next? We could talk about this for a long time, especially with all of these gigantic brains on the conversation today. Thank you, Lee, Ben, and Robert we talked about really tactical stuff. We talked about really philosophical stuff. I feel like it's a big conversation, so there's more to talk about. And stay tuned for future episodes on more AI-related things, because as it develops, there'll be more ideas about how this becomes relevant in the arena of marketing. But as always, the goal of the Crazy Stupid in Marketing show is to help demystify some of the things that might sound confusing about stuff and redirect the focus back into what are you trying to do and how can all of these things help you get there. So stay tuned for another episode soon. Thank you, Dan, for joining us in the chat, and thank you everyone else who was listening who did not join us in the chat. Next time, join us in the chat. It adds more value to the conversation for everybody. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.